Hey guys, and welcome back to another Jay the One Eye Gamer video. Today's video is going to be a Let's Talk, something I haven't done in a very long time. And I wanted to talk about this game for a while since its reveal last year at E3. And the game, obviously, it's Devil May Cry 5. And it also showed up on my top 10 most anticipated games video. So if you didn't check that out, it should show up in the eye icon right about now. So please click that if you want to watch the video. I worked real hard on that. But essentially what I want to do is just talk about the game, give a little history about the franchise, some of the characters, maybe the story of Devil May Cry up until 5, if I can get all that. You know, just talk about the game, get you guys hyped about it, see if you haven't heard anything about it. So that's pretty much what I want to do with this video. But before we dive in, if you're new here, please feel free to hit that subscribe button. It really helps out the channel. And if you do hit the subscribe button, make sure to hit that little bell icon so it lets you know when my videos go up. And another thing, if you do hear a fan in the background, I do apologize. That is my heater running, because as of this recording, it is pretty cold outside and I don't want to freeze while making this video, so I do apologize for that. But without further ado, let's jump into this. To start off, we'll talk about a little bit about the history of Devil May Cry, the franchise. For you guys who don't know about the Devil May Cry franchise, it is essentially a hack and slash action game with a high emphasis on stylish combat. If you've never played it, think of games of like Bayonetta and Ninja Gaiden that are very executionary heavy and reward you for being as stylish as possible or being most efficient with combos as possible. So Devil May Cry started that whole genre, I believe. There are indeed 6 games in this franchise. Now I know what you're thinking, since it's Devil May Cry 5, where is the 6th game? Well, there are 2 timelines for these franchises. The first timeline is the main timeline, which we all kind of agree is the one that Devil May Cry 5 is falling into. The next timeline is the DMC Devil May Cry timeline, which as of right now only has 1 entry in it, and that was done with Capcom working with Ninja Theory. I don't know if they'll ever return to that timeline, but as of right now, it is the only game in it. Also, a little more about the franchise. The story mostly revolves around one character, and his name is Dante, the main protagonist. And he's been the main protagonist for essentially about 3.5 of the games in the main timeline. With the exception of Devil May Cry 4, he's still in there, but he takes more of a backseat role to the newcomer Nero, who was more spearheaded to be his replacement for the franchise. Also, just a little more backstory. Pretty much the whole premise of the stories are Dante is a legendary demon hunter, and he's going out to battle all these demons who are essentially either trying to conquer the human world or humans who are using demonic powers to turn themselves into a demon to then try and conquer the world. Essentially, it's all just based around demonic arts, and Dante's the one that usually shows up and lays the smackdown on the guys. With DMC 4, we gotta look at Nero, who essentially is pretty much the same thing, except he started off as a holy knight, but then eventually becomes a demon hunter like Dante. I'll go more in depth on those guys later, along with the other playable character, but that is essentially how the franchise gets its start. So I guess we can talk about the story of Devil May Cry 5. The story of Devil May Cry 5 takes place after Devil May Cry 4. The timeline for the DMC franchise as of right now, because I think they switched it, is Devil May Cry 3, Devil May Cry 1, Devil May Cry the anime, Devil May Cry 2, Devil May Cry 4, and Devil May Cry 5 at the end of the timeline. So it's at the very tail end of the franchise. Essentially, the story up until this point is Nero's a full-fledged demon hunter now, just like Dante. He has a Devil May Cry sign, he's got his own business. Then one day, a hooded figure who is strongly believed to be Virgil, his father, shows up and literally rips his arm off, the arm that is holding the Yamato, and he leaves with it by cutting open a dimensional portal. And essentially that kicks off the game as the prologue, because at the same time, a new character who I will talk about after this section, V, also shows up to recruit Dante, Lady, and Trish, but mostly Dante, to fight this new demon lord that's showing up, kind of thought to be resurrecting another demon. It's strongly hinted, and with that, they all go off to what seems to be the demon world to fight this new demon lord called Urizen before he has a chance to actually do anything. Needless to say, at this time, Nero is still missing his arm, so he's kind of going into the fight with only one arm. At this point, it seems pretty much like they lose, because Dante is uncharacteristically pretty much getting his ass kicked along with Lady and Trish. V doesn't participate in the fight at all, and Nero shows up pretty much after Dante's been given a whooping. Nero challenges Urizen and obviously loses. Pretty much after that point, the game then picks up the story a month after that. That considers that as the start of the game. Dante has been missing for about a month. Nero and V have not been able to find him, so we don't know what's going on with that. Essentially, because of that, Nero now has a new arm via his co-worker Nico, who makes him these robotic arms to replace for his Devilbringer that was taken from him. And him and V essentially go on a quest to both find Dante and also find a way to stop the demon tree that shows up in the city from blooming. From what we know of the demon tree, it is essentially supposed to bear a fruit that we hear from one of the bosses, and it's supposed to give you either, I'm imagining, superpowers beyond belief or the ability to resurrect, because like we said, Urizen was said to be trying to resurrect someone. So we don't know know who that is. That's pretty much all we know through the story as of right now. You do know that Dante survives because obviously he's a playable character, but essentially the game is set up that we have 3 protagonists. I guess it's a great way to segue into the characters now. I'm going to start off with Dante since he has the most history with the franchise. So Dante is a half human, half demon. His mother is Ava, and his father was the legendary Dark Knight Sparta. Is essentially a pivotal member of the franchise. You never meet him entirely. He's only pretty much, I guess, shown off in the very first Devil May Cry in the intro, where he's doing swordplay. But for all intents and purposes, Sparta's story is this. He was a demon general with Mundus, who was the main bad guy of the first Devil May Cry game, and they were going to conquer the human world. Around that time, though, Sparta decided to rebel on his own against his entire kind and pretty much beat them all back and sealed them away back into the demon realm. Now, the game says for about a millennia, he was pretty much on Earth in human form, just watching over everyone. And within that time frame, he falls in love with Ava, who then they get married and produce both Dante and Virgil, Dante's twin brother. That's pretty much where Sparta's stories end. After his father's passing, it is assumed that his brother and his mother are both killed. His mother is definitely most killed, but his brother Virgil is not killed at that point. After that traumatic experience, Dante spends the rest of his life pretty much being a mercenary, and then eventually becomes a devil hunter, and his sole purpose with that is to pretty much kill the demon who killed his mother, and also pretty much just kill demons and protect humans like his father. So that is Dante in a nutshell, and he has been the main protagonist pretty much for about 3.5 games. Next, we'll talk about Nero. Nero is essentially the new protagonist of the Devil May Cry series. I think after DMC 5, they're going to retire Dante, and pretty much if they do a DMC 6 in this timeline, I'm pretty sure Nero is going to take the helms from this. It was heavily implied in DMC 4 that he was going to be the new protagonist. This time around, he doesn't have his Devil Bringer arm like he did in DMC 4. That's the main shtick, because now he has Devil Breakers, which are mechanical arms that he can switch out for. His whole premise is in DMC 4, he was a young knight in the Order who worshipped Sparta, Dante's father, and in the events of DMC 4, he runs into Dante. He also has a love interest in Kyrie, and through the events, Kyrie gets kidnapped, and he kind of essentially has to go and rescue her. And at the same time, it is heavily hinted that he is Virgil's son, at least in DMC 4. It's not until after DMC 4 that we get full confirmation that he is, in fact, Virgil's son. He is gifted the Yamato by Dante after the events of Devil May Cry 4. We assume Dante knows that it's his nephew and that that's possibly Virgil's son. It's never fully explained, but it's heavily hinted at, and he's also the one that gifts Nero with his Devil May Cry sign and pretty much lets him franchise out. In DMC 5, with the loss of his arm, he's kind of annoyed and pissed off, and he wants it back, along with the Yamato, so that's why he's going after Urizen. Next, the character we know least about and is the brand new character to the franchise is a character named V. I want to say he's a demon, but he's a very low-class demon, and by that I mean he's a summoner of some kind, because he doesn't really fight himself. He's kind of feeble in that regard. His main weapon is a cane, but he doesn't have really any great mobility options on his own. So the whole premise of V, he uses 2 summoned animals, a bird named Griffin and a panther named Shadow, to be his weapons for him, and he's very mysterious. He's also the one that showed up and asked Dante to take on Urizen. It's heavily hinted that he might be working for either Urizen or Mundus, the bad guy from the first game, but it's almost speculation at this point until we get our hands on the game. But that is essentially our 3 main characters. And then finally, we're going to talk about the gameplay. I'm going to talk about Dante and V first, only because I haven't played as them, and I can only take the information that I've heard from other YouTubers and gaming sites because they've had the chance to play the characters. Whereas Nero, I've had a little bit with because of the DMC 5 demo they put out for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One recently. So I guess to start off with Dante, from what I've heard, he is pretty much just an upgraded version of his Devil May Cry 4 version of Dante, which is good. For you guys that don't know, in Devil May Cry 3, they introduced a style system, which lets you have different styles. So you had Trickster, which was pretty much your ability to get around the area quicker. You had Swordmaster, which amplified your combos and gave special perks to your devil arms, your melee weapons. Gunslinger, which did the same for your guns, and then Royal Guard, which was like a counter system. And in DMC 3, you can only take one of those styles per mission. In DMC 4, they let you take all 4 styles at once, so you could switch through them via the D-pad selection. I think they upgraded the switch time for each of them, so it's even faster. So that's really cool. But essentially, there's not much to say about Dante other than the fact he's the quintessential Devil May Cry experience. If you're an old school fan, or if you're interested in how old Devil May Cry used to play, Dante would be the character you want to try out, and I definitely can't wait, and I love how he looks. And I just hope they let us go into his Majin form. For you guys that don't know, his Majin form is his most powerful devil trigger, which was introduced in DMC 2, and it had a stipulation in order to activate it. You had to be near death and had a full devil trigger, and you had to jump in the air and then activate devil trigger, and that would activate the Majin form. And in that form, Dante was essentially invincible. Like, he took no damage, he did a crap ton of damage, and he was even taller, and he just looks so awesome. And I hope that, if you can see on the screen, we seem to think that this might be his Majin form, since it shares a lot of similarities with the Majin form via the quad wings. We just think this is an updated version, and if it is, I hope they let us play as it, because it looks so badass. Next will be V. From what I understand, V is the most technical character in the franchise. Like I said, he himself is not the main attacker. Like I said before, he relies on Griffin and Shadow to do the combat for him. Griffin is essentially his ranged attack, and Shadow is his melee attacks. He also has a third Guardian, which can only be activated via his Devil Trigger, where he snaps his fingers and he gets silver hair, and that one is Nightmare. And all three of his summons are references to DMC1 bosses or enemies, which I think is really nice. But with V, he has to be the one to land the finishing blow on the enemies, because his familiars can't do that. So the whole premise is to maneuver him around the battlefield while his familiars do the work, and then let him come in for the finishing kill. So it's interesting because we've never seen a character like that in DMC. And essentially you're controlling like three characters at once. You're controlling Griffin, Shadow, and V, and you have to maneuver them in a way that he can get to the enemy. So I'm very curious and interested to see how he plays. I don't know if I'll like the playstyle, but it is interesting for the franchise itself. And then last we have Nero, and like I said, I played him in the DMC5 demo, and essentially from what it felt like is he felt like Nero, and for that it was, if you played Devil May Cry 4, pretty much all of Nero's moves are intact from that. The only difference is instead of his Devil Bringer, and if you guys don't know what his Devil Bringer is, it is a demonic arm he got. The whole thing was it allowed him to interact with the environment by shooting out a astral arm that could either drag enemies to Nero or catapult him towards them, and so that actually made combat a little easier. You still have that ability, but it's not the arm itself. You have like a little grappling hook on it that he can pull enemies towards him. But essentially you have different Devil Breakers, which are the arms that Nico makes for you. You can only have up to, I think in the demo, about 4. I don't know if there's a way to increase that number, but the ones that we did use were pretty much the Gerber, the Punchline, and the Overture. I'll say my favorite from what I played was the Gerberture. The only reason is because it allows you to be a little more fast on the battlefield, and by that I mean when you click B and a directional button with it, it launches Nero by making a shockwave, so you can essentially just dance in the air, and the shockwave does hurt. Its standard B is he just holds his hands out and does a shockwave. Kind of hurts the enemy. Pretty much its charge attacks, which are by holding the Devil Breaker button. You have one where he shoots a giant beam of energy from his hand, like a Kamehameha, and you get to direct that at the enemy. And then another one is if you jump in the air and he does it, he shoots out a scatter ray shot, which pretty much devastates everything in the area and is a great way to get an S rank. My next would probably be the Overture. Overture is essentially what would be considered just a massive shocker, because all it really does is he puts his hand out and a giant shock of energy comes out of it. It's really devastating. The regular ground one, it just shoots out a giant hand-like wave in front of it. It doesn't go any further. It also has the ability to guard certain boss attacks, like it does with the Goliath in the game, where if he starts charging at you, you can do that and it instantly like knocks him back, so that's very fun. The charge attack has Nero essentially shove his arm into the enemy, kick it off, and then after a certain time it explodes, doing massive damage. The final one was the Punchline, and the Punchline is Nero will throw out his arm and it will turn into a rocket that will fly around and hit the enemy repeatedly, which is good for comboing and juggling. And there's also a special feature where if you're able to jump on it, it turns into like a hoverboard and you're able to ride the rocket around while you're fighting it. Like I said, with Nero itself, he feels very much like DMC4 Nero with an upgrade. I kind of like the fact that he has more options now, because in Devil May Cry 4 he felt very limited compared to Dante, and he definitely feels limited if you play the Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition with his father Virgil as a playable character, Trish and Lady. Like, he felt like the most bare bones of them. I do like the fact that they gave him more variety in his gameplay, which he was sorely missing in DMC4. But that's about gonna do it for the video, guys. I hope this wasn't too long. I just wanted to talk about the game, give some basic information. The game is coming out on March 8th, so only a couple weeks away. I can't wait for it. It's gonna be one of my most anticipated games of this year. I'd like to do a week of DMC5, but I don't know if you guys would like that, so please feel free to leave me some comments in the comment section. Let me know if you'd like to see any of that. Also, let me know if you guys are as hyped for Devil May Cry 5 as I am, and if you've never heard of Devil May Cry, did this video like pique your interest? I hope it did. If you want to hit me up on Twitter, please feel free to hit me up there too. That's going to be in the description down below. That's about going to do it for this video, guys. Again, I can't wait for this game. It is like one of my most anticipated, and I just love hack and slash action games. Like, they are my favorite. I may not be the best at them, but I love them, and you get a certain feeling when you get better at the games. Like, they just feel awesome to play, and the better you get it with the game, the more fun it is. At least that's how it is for me. I want to thank you guys very much for watching and all the support. I want you all to have a great day, and remember, let's rock!